90.7 KPFK, Los Angeles.
The following radio program has been approved for broadcast by the Federal Communications Commission and is in compliance with all community standards. Thank you.
From Los Angeles,
The Cary Harrison Files. Crack the code and break the lock. Racing shadows round the clock. We're the ones to find the truth for all the lost and hurtless youth. Yeah, we'll find the truth. The Cary Harrison Files.
And it is the Cary Harrison Files. Welcome. Glad to have you aboard. We're streaming right now on Substack and YouTube. All you have to do is simply Google Cary Harrison, C-A-R-Y, Harrison, Substack or YouTube, and that way we can stay connected when you arrive at your destination. You can also easily find us right now, video streaming at kpfk.net. That's kpfk.net. Also, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at caryharrison.com. There you're going to get a transcript of the entire show, plus access to clips and stuff that we simply cannot do on the radio. You heard Tom Hartman talk about Project 2025. Yep, we are listed by call letters and we are in the crosshairs. And that's our newsletter at caryharrison.com. Well. Pull up a chair. Pour something steaming and brown. And let me tell you about the single greatest act of civil clarification this republic has managed since it decided that only property-owning white men had the moral bandwidth to vote. We've arrived, finally. We have crested the hill. The Pentagon, now the Department of War, that magnificent five-sided monument to controlled explosions and uncontrolled budgets, has finally cleaned house. Now, I want you to sit with that phrase, cleaned house, because that's exactly what they did. They looked at the United States military, the most expensive, most lethal, most testosterone-marinated institution in human history, and they said, there are too many of the wrong people in here. Too many women. Too many black soldiers. Too many of the gender fluid, the gender curious, the gender ambitious. Too many human beings whose very existence apparently constitutes a threat to unit cohesion, to national security, and we can only assume someone's very fragile self-concept. And so the Pentagon acted. The Department of War acted. They purged quietly, efficiently, with the kind of administrative elegance you'd normally reserve for retiring a stapler. Discharge papers, policy reversals, bureaucratic language so sterile it could scrub a crime scene. The Department of Defense, which couldn't find weapons of mass destruction with both hands and a flashlight, well, it did find time to audit exactly which categories of American citizens were, shall we say, insufficiently God and country, close quote, for continued service. Now, what does God and country look like? I'm glad you asked. Because nobody's saying it out loud, which is itself the tell. Nobody's standing at a podium going, we'd like our military to look like a mid-century country club that's just discovered protein powder. Nobody's saying that. They're using words like readiness and standards and cohesion, which are the linguistic equivalent of a trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. You know something's underneath it. You can smell the agenda. You're just not supposed to point. But here on the Cary Harrison Files, pointing is what we do. So let me reframe this for you. Let me give you the gift that the architects of this policy clearly intended, because I don't think you've been properly grateful. And that's not their fault. That's your fault. This is what they're telling us. The problem with visionary ideological engineering is that the masses are simply not spiritually evolved enough to receive it. Think about what they've actually built. They've constructed at taxpayer expense a military force purified of complexity, a fighting force unburdened by the messy, distracting presence of people who menstruate, people who transition, people whose skin carries pigment in quantities that make certain PowerPoint presentations uncomfortable. They've stripped the armed forces down to its essence, its platonic ideal, a glorious, cohesive, beige to pink spectrum of righteousness, locked and loaded, ready to defend the homeland from whatever the homeland's decided is threatening it this week. It's now clean. It's focused. It's the military equivalent of a restoration hardware catalog. Everything's matching, nothing too challenging, very easy to return. And let me tell you about the tactical genius of this, because you're sleeping on it. You know what doesn't distract a soldier? Not having to acknowledge that the person next to them transitioned 3 years ago and can still outrun, can still outshoot, and still out-deadlift them. That's distracting, apparently. The competence is distracting, apparently. The presence is distracting, apparently. The sheer audacity of existing in a foxhole while being something other than the default setting. Gone now. Poof. Problem solved. You know what else is gone? The friction. The productive, civilizational friction of being in close quarters with someone whose experience of America is fundamentally different from yours. Someone who signed the same oath, accepted the same risk, wore the same uniform, and still got called something ugly in the mess hall. That friction, that humanizing discomfort, has been surgically removed, like a splinter, like a conscience. Now it's smooth, so smooth. And the black soldiers? Oh, let's not be coy. The numbers don't lie, and neither do discharge patterns. The black soldiers who built entire chapters of American military history that this country spent 50 years crediting to someone else? The ones who flew, who bled, who stormed beaches and jungles and urban hellscapes under a flag that didn't always wave back. They're a readiness concern now. Did you know that? Readiness, as in their presence, is the problem, not the bullets, not the IEDs, not the 16-year wars with no exit strategy and contractors getting rich while kids from Compton and Cleveland catch the consequences. No, them, they who stand there, they who simply are being there. That's the logistical challenge that we need to solve. The audacity is architectural at this point. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com, riding on a beautiful music bed that really tells the story with audiophonic magic. GoHarrison.com, by the way, if that's easier for you. Live video streaming on YouTube and Substack and everything with a chip and a signal, or a video shortcut at kpfk.net. kpfk.net. You can later listen as a podcast across every service. Simply Google Cary Harrison or the Cary Harrison Files. Our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show, plus the calls coming up and stuff we can't say on the radio, is Cary, C-A-R-Y, Harrison, or GoHarrison.com. Oh, did we forget the women? The women. Sweet Jesus. Where do we even start with the women? The women who've been doing 2 jobs since they enlisted. The actual job and the job of proving to every skeptic above them in rank that they deserve to be there. The women who've carried weight, literal and metaphorical. that would buckle half the men who signed their performance reviews. Gone, poof, or going, or being made uncomfortable enough that leaving starts to look like a reasonable choice, which is its own kind of genius, isn't it? You don't have to fire someone if you make the environment hostile enough that they fire themselves. That's not discrimination, that's ambient policy. Kind of like self-deporting. You just make it so hostile that you leave on your own. You self-deport, or you fire yourself from the military. It's not discrimination, ambient policy. And that is what they call elegant. Now, I want to be very precise here because precision matters. This isn't being sold as bigotry. It's never sold as bigotry. Bigotry went out of style, at least rhetorically, somewhere around 1965 when the optics became untenable. What they sell you now is standards. What they sell you now is biology. What they sell you now is cohesion. And I need you to understand that cohesion in this context means everyone in the unit shares the same basic assumptions about who counts as a person. And that cohesion, that beautiful, frictionless agreement, is worth more to the institution than the human beings it's discarding. Let that land for a second. Cohesion over competence. Comfort over capability. The feeling of everyone looking the same, thinking the same, praying to the same God and country vision of what an American soldier is supposed to be. That feeling is being protected at cost, at your cost, at their cost, at the cost of people who served, at the cost of people who sacrificed, at the cost of people who showed up and did the work and are now being told that their paperwork is in order and their services are no longer required. And you're supposed to see this as strength. You're supposed to see the narrowing as vigor, the exclusion as precision, the deliberate reduction of human diversity in the ranks as a feature rather than what any sane person, any historically literate person, any person who's read more than 2 paragraphs of actual military history would recognize as a catastrophic own goal dressed up in the language of virtue. But hey, maybe you're not worthy of appreciating it. Maybe the vision is just too big for you. Maybe you need to sit with your smallness and your woke confusion and your inability to grasp the greatest military power in human history. That's stronger now. That's stronger because it decided that a transgender woman who speaks 3 languages and passed every physical qualification is less valuable than the symbolic comfort of not having to confront her existence. Maybe that's on you. Or, and I offer this as a humble alternative, maybe what you're watching is the logical endpoint of a very old, very stupid American tradition, the tradition of mistaking familiarity for excellence, of confusing conformity with strength, of building institutions in the image of whoever's currently holding the pen, and then writing everyone else out of the story. We would call this a newspaper in the old days. We would call this journalism in the old days. Whoever owns the printing press writes the story. They hire the editors-in-chief that spike your stories. And I really want to tell you about an incredible story I did when I was at CBS that never got on the air about selling organs for profit. It was a giant story. They spiked it and said, no, we do panda births at the zoo. It's a great story. But whoever owns it declares it. This isn't new. It's not clever. It's not strength. It's a firing squad that started shooting inward. We've seen it in the media. We've seen it everywhere. We now see it in our own military forces that are stating that they want to be combat ready, but they're shooting themselves first. I mean, wow. A lot of you listening are vets. You know what works, what doesn't work. You know why. You know that a well-organized militia, not a militia of people that have this many teeth, but an actual militia of competent, talented people is an actual militia, not like this ridiculous thing. The truly magnificent part, though, let's just be honest, the chef's kiss, the pièce de résistance, as they would say in cooking, is that they're going to call it patriotism. They're going to stand in front of a flag. They're going to use the word warrior. They're going to invoke God and country and the sacrifice of the fallen who include every category of person that they're currently throwing out the door. And they're going to say, this is what America stands for. And some of you are going to nod. And that right there is the bit that keeps me and the whole lot of us, coming back each week to try to fix this madness. It's for the handful of you that are nodding right now. So I want you to stay with me because we're just getting started and we're going to get into the Epstein thing and men and what it means. Do you need to be rich to pull this off, or is it going on everywhere else too? Cary Harrison with you, the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com and GoHarrison.com. Live video streaming on YouTube, Substack, everything with a chip and a signal, or video shortcut at kpfk.net. Later, a podcast on every service. Our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show, stuff we can't say on the radio, is CaryHarrison.com. We're going to pause for a second, and we're going to give some love to, our favorite radio station. So we're going to pause right now, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to jump into the most amazing stuff and open up the phones.
The Cary Harrison Files.
Okay, you're listening to KPFK, and this is where we don't flinch. I'm going to offer you something along with Gary Baca, who's joining me right now. Gary, I want to welcome you to your own radio station.
Well, thank you, Cary. It's good to be with you.
Glad to have you here because you're going to bring to us something for a simple $125 pledge this morning. We're offering Spider Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein by Barry Levine, who's a forensic excavator of power, money, and the kind of moral rot that prefers private islands and sealed indictments. And we all know the name Jeffrey Epstein. The headlines were loud. The ending was convenient. Like, how do you hang yourself or kill yourself in an empty room? Well, to sheets just must be the laundry service, just like Goering. Somebody must have brought you, huh? The web. The web was quieter, and that's where Levine went digging, the internet. It isn't tabloid froth. It's the investigative reporting that traces how influence insulated a predator, how institutions blinked when they should have bellowed, and how proximity to power can function like diplomatic immunity for the well-connected. This book doesn't scream at documents. It doesn't speculate. It corroborates. And in an age when outrage is cheap and facts are rationed, that's oxygen. Gary, give us the quick upload on this beautiful, beautiful thank you gift.
Yes, of course, Cary, but we talk about Jeffrey Epstein, a pimp without the outfit. So basically out there, we got to call it what it is. You know, he was just a pimp for the elite and the politicians. But yes, we have the book, Barry Levin, his book called The Spider, and this is for $125 pledge. And this jumps into the darkest corners of Epstein's world. So we find out about Bill Clinton. You know, they called him Wild Bill Clinton over there at the island, Prince Andrew, and Donald Trump. And this guy's trying to hide everything. This guy will burn down the world just so you wouldn't know about the Epstein files. Everything's coming out about all these underage women, young girls that were going to the island. They were recruited by models. And this talks about that in this book, Spider, featuring rare and never before seen photographs. So folks, if you want to know the truth and want to know it from Spider from Barry Levine, call now and pledge your support at the $125 level. That's $10 a month, or how about $20 a month? That makes it easy for you. 818-985-5735. And this goes towards the Cary Harrison Files, but ultimately it's for KPFK Radio that we can remain on the air and give you the Cary Harrison Files, this fine show. 818-985-5735. You laughed, you've cried, you've called in for Cary Harrison, and you know that you're a big supporter. So if you're on your commute now, go ahead and please call and pledge your support. We also have the Virginia Giuffre book, Nobody's Girl, for a $125 donation to the station. And she recounts everything that she went through working with Trump and the terrible things that she had to deal with, her ordeal with the Epstein Trump folks. So once again, 818-985-5735. This goes towards Cary Harrison and KPFK. So we really need your support. We only have one person on the line for Cary Harrison, and we're looking for more. So we still have about 35 minutes or so to get you to those phones and pledge your support.
What a great chance to pivot and point out we're going to actually jump into the Epstein thing coming up, but also how it's working around the world in all other places, other countries at the same time with a different flavor, and how you can spot it and how we can understand human behavior, which is what we've been focusing on today, is how language is used as a weapon. Gary Baca, you have presented this in the most calm and relaxed tone. I am not. I am a wound up alpha today. And I just want to remind everyone, for your $125 pledge, you're going to receive Spider, a thank you gift. But what you're really funding is the kind of reporting that asks uncomfortable questions and keeps asking them. You're underwriting microphones that don't bow. Producers, of which we have none, although the great Renee Yawarski is our technical director, a goddess who actually clerked for the Supreme Court back when it was, well, let's just say a better version. She is a well-trained pit bull producer-tricks. Try saying that 10 times fast. People who don't scare easily. That's all of us here. A signal that still believes sunlight isn't a metaphor. That's this radio station. It's a duty for us to be here. So if you value investigative journalism that isn't housebroken, this is your moment. Pick up the phone and call 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK, or go to kpfk.org. Stand with reporting that follows the web wherever it leaves, or leads, even better. Make the $125 pledge. Let's keep the lights on where the shadows prefer darkness. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, or go to kpfk.org, $125 pledge. Boy, it will last in perpetuity. And now, back to the show.
The Cary Harrison Files.
Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com. Live video streaming on YouTube and Substack, everything with a chip and a signal, or a video shortcut at kpfk.net. You can later listen as a podcast across every service. Our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show, stuff we can't say on the radio, is at CaryHarrison.com or GoHarrison.com. Well, let's now jump over to Florida, or Florida, as they say, where you know who lives. Over on that side. Florida, you magnificent, humidity-soaked laboratory of American id. You strip mall fever dream, you place where the aquifers are collapsing, where the insurance industry's already packed its bags, where rent is eating people alive, and the legislature, your legislature, which is soon going to be everyone's legislature, if we sit on our large curd cottage cheese fannies and do nothing as the midterms approach, throw our hands up in the air and say, well, gosh, you know, what's for dinner? That legislature in Florida is going to become your legislature, no matter where you live. So let's look at all of that. Let's look at the burning house and watch them say, you know what this situation needs? This is what they're saying in Florida. This situation needs less Black History Month. That's what's happening in Tallahassee as we speak. And that's where we are. That's the play. That's the ideological vision being executed with great focus, with great energy, with the kind of institutional commitment that would be genuinely impressive if it were aimed at literally any actual problem. In the state of Florida, winter right now, spring. While the rest of us are, you, if you're listening in Florida, and you probably are on the stream, trying to figure out how your homeowner's premium doubled and your teacher got arrested for having a library. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we're going to do this properly because we're going to honor the craft of radio here. Because what Tallahassee has produced this session isn't merely bad legislation. It's a suite. It's a tasting menu of authoritarian cosplay. It's 3 different bills, 3 gorgeous, finely engineered instruments of civic cruelty, packed together with the kind of thematic unity you'd normally expect from a concept album by a band that's very angry and hasn't been laid recently. Let me introduce these bills to you because you're going to see them soon where you live, and they deserve proper introductions. Bill the first, HB 1001, the Anti-Diversity Bill. So this dovetails off what we were talking about earlier, now that the Department of War has scrubbed itself of everything that isn't pink or beige. The state of Florida at the state level is now setting the template for all the other states in the union, starting with what they're calling the Anti-Diversity Bill. The one that bans, and I need you to hear this clearly, bans local governments from officially recognizing Pride Month or Black History Month. And guess what month this is still? Your city council, your county commission, all of those people you elected to represent your community's actual composition are now legally prohibited from acknowledging that gay people even exist, or that Black history is, ready for this one? That Black history is American history, or that your community contains multitudes. Now, they're not calling it the Anti-Diversity Bill, obviously. They never lead with the honest name. If legislation came with accurate titles, we'd have the "We find this group disgusting and want them to know it" act, and the "Please distract voters from the insurance crisis by making teachers cry" bill. But they don't do that. They use procedural numbers and neutral language and then file it quietly, hoping you're not going to notice until it's signed. But it also, and this is the chef's kiss, the structural elegance that separates the amateurs from the artists, it targets the elected officials themselves. Not just the municipalities, the people, the humans who ran for office, the ones who actually care, the ones who won, the ones who now face personal legal exposure for doing something as incendiary as putting up a rainbow flag outside City Hall in June. That's the move. Make the person personally liable. Make it cost them. Make the act of representation, the actual core function of representative government, an actionable offense, so that the next person thinking about running for city council in a diverse district does a quick risk assessment and decides, maybe not. That's not legislation. That's a chilling effect with a filing fee. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com. Don't forget to get a transcript of this entire show, including the calls coming up at Cary Harrison or GoHarrison.com. So you're supposed to see this as protecting you. These bills that are going to metastasize and spread across all 50 states, or 51 if Greenland is added in, or Mexico, as we're told, could happen. You're supposed to see this as protecting you. But protecting you from what? From recognition? From the unspeakable horror of a government that knows its community includes gay people and says so. The threat apparently is acknowledgement, just like the Department of War. The weapon of mass destruction is a proclamation. Let's look at Bill the Second coming your way. HB 743, the More Lawsuits for Teachers and Doctors Bill, though they'd never call it that either. This one criminalizes aiding and abetting gender-affirming care for minors. Now, aiding and abetting, that phrase, in Florida law, that's the language of accessories to crime in Florida. That's what you say about the guy who drove the getaway car. They've taken that language and wrapped it around a parent who drives their kid to a medical appointment. And who's to say what kind of medical appointment that was? That language now applies to a parent or a teacher who simply refers a struggling student to a counselor. A counselor! Or a pediatrician who follows the clinical guidelines of every major medical association in the whole country. Or a librarian who, God forbid, has a book. I know. It sounds like Orwell and Huxley. It can't be real. Oh, it's real, and it's coming your way. This is why suiting up and showing up now more than ever matters. These are now your potential criminals. These are your accessories under state law. The care itself, the thing being protected against, is medically recognized treatment. Yep, that's what the public is being protected against, is medically recognized treatment. The American Academy of Pediatrics supports it all. The American Medical Association supports it. The American Psychological Association supports it. The clinical literature supports it. But Florida's legislature has determined that it knows better than the entire accumulated body of pediatric medicine, and that the appropriate response to a child in distress is not care, it's prosecution of everyone around them. This is a special kind of genius, I have to say. It is so perverse and twisted, and could only come out of the head of one particular Ronald Dion DeSantis. And look, I want to be really precise here. This isn't about protecting children. If it were about protecting children, they'd be passing bills about the child welfare system, which in Florida is a bureaucratic disaster with a body count. If it were about protecting children, they'd be funding mental health services in schools. If it were about protecting children, they'd be addressing the fact that LGBTQ youth have dramatically higher rates of depression and suicide, not because they're transgender, but because the world keeps telling them they're a problem to be solved. But you see, they're not doing any of that. They're criminalizing the parents who show up. And as far as I knew, parents had a special kind of sovereignty. They got to parent their children. Isn't everything about parents having the right to make decisions on behalf of their children, to do whatever they want, vaccinate them, not whatever? Not in Florida, which is on the way to a state near you, including California here, criminalizing all the parents who actually show up for their children, making it impossible for a parent to parent. That means the government is the parent. Boy, that's the opposite of the grand old party, at least traditionally, right? They're going after the teachers who listen. They're making it legally hazardous to simply be in the vicinity of a child who needs help. Legally hazardous to simply be in the vicinity of a child who needs help. That's not protection. That's abandonment with paperwork. Coming to a state near you, Bill the Third. Then we're going to open up the phones. It's the Don't Say Gay or Trans at Work bill, which authorizes, not really called that, which authorizes, as in gives explicit legal permission to anti-transgender discrimination in government and certain private workplaces. Certain private workplaces would be all private workplaces, because if you don't define certain, certain means all. In other words, the one that is the certain one that isn't involved is not listed, therefore all are listed. This, again, is the genius of clever language. Now, nearly half of LGBTQ adults in this country, and listening right now, we know that at least 10% are out, maybe another 20%, or up to about 20% are whatever. You know, you do what you do, and you're nice and you're decent and whatever. 10% of the animal kingdom is same-sexual, from seagulls to giraffes, everything. It is just the way it is. It's like being left-handed. You're not kidding. You're actually left-handed, or you have blue eyes, the way I do. I'm not kidding. That was born that way, you know, sorry. So, but turning it into a thing that needs to be solved. And that's what they do, because in a disaster area, a red state where everything is falling apart, and they refuse to fix it, because the more desperate people are, the more they're willing to vote for a strong man to fix the problem. So it is a planned event, all of this. And what do they always use first? The gays. It's kind of easy, right? Because the gays generally kind of do their own thing. They don't lockstep in line. They don't live in a traditional thousands of years old way, because they're not participating in that. Boy, it sounds, I'm saying it clumsily. I'm never going to dig myself out of this one. It's like being left-handed in a right-handed world. You're just not trying to be right-handed, so you're being left-handed, which means there's fewer of you, and they make fewer left-handed scissors, but you can still cut paper. In fact, you can cut it well, because you can also step into the right-handed lane. The right-handed people cannot necessarily step into the left-handed lane. That is what frustrates governments. So nearly half the adults in this country report they're less out somewhere in their lives over the past year. That means half of people are going back in the closet, like it's the 1950s. In the state of Florida, where these laws are passing, they're going back in the closet at work. They're going back in the closet with family, and in their neighborhoods. They're less out. That means they're more hidden. They're more performing. They're more spending cognitive and emotional energy on managing other people's discomfort with their existence while trying to do their actual jobs. And into that environment, into a workforce already flinching with AI poised to take everything away anyway, Florida's legislature wants to introduce formal legal authorization for that discrimination. Not tolerance of discrimination, not negligent failure to prevent it, authorization. And by the way, if you push a bunch of men back into the closet and don't allow them to be congruent with their nature, which, of course, in the Constitution, one has the right to self-determination. You could even look at it as a First Amendment right, freedom of expression. If you push them back in the closet, all those beautiful women are going to end up having to marry them, because they're going to have to pretend they're straight, and they're going to have to take on a wife, just because a bunch of morons in these kind of governments have made it that way. And then these women lose, a decade of their life, because they think it's real, because they can't know. And you can't restore their youth. You can't put them back on the market the way they were when they left. It's human theft. It's not right. And again, we're getting into this Epstein territory. Again, all of this is part of the patriarchy. That's what we're getting at. Aha! The light bulbs on the Christmas tree of understanding are going bing, 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 bing. They're giving a permission slip signed by the state saying, yes, you can treat this person as less than. And the economic argument alone should make every Chamber of Commerce member in the state reach for an antacid. You're in a talent competition with every other state in the country. You're trying to attract businesses, Florida. Palantir just relocated to Miami. Palantir, how many times have we talked about that? the giant government AI that is building massive personal dossiers on each of you, as for the first time ever in human history, all the silos went down between the government departments so that Medicare can look at the IRS under Mr. Musk. Remember, they went in with hard drives, 19-year-olds, all of that being fed to this giant government AI being moved to Ron DeSantis's Florida, to Miami. The same Miami, the same Florida, trying to attract industries, skilled workers. And the competitive offer is we have legal discrimination. Well, that's hot. We have legal discrimination. We don't in California. I mean, remember, California is the reason we got gay marriage. It's also the reason we got interracial marriage, partially. The Constitution in California says you can't have two classes of citizens. You're either a Californian or you ain't. But in Florida, there's legal discrimination. Black people don't exist. Gays don't exist. It's a figment of your imagination, legally. Come build your company in Florida, where we've made it easier to fire, demote, or simply make miserable a significant percentage of your workforce, where your LGBTQ plus employees will spend a portion of every working day calculating their exposure, where the most qualified candidate might politely decline your offer because they've read the news. That's your pitch, Florida. Come for the humidity. Stay because the lease trapped you. Jesus. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files. You can hear me smiling. I'm smiling in the grim way. I have such an allergy to this stuff. CaryHarrison.com, GoHarrison.com, live video streaming on YouTube, Substack, and everything with a chip and a signal, or a video shortcut at kpfk.net. You can later listen as a podcast across every service. Simply Google Cary Harrison or Cary Harrison Files, and our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show, stuff we can't say in the radio, is at CaryHarrison.com or GoHarrison.com. Now, before we open up the phones at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, I want to connect some dots because dots deserve connecting. And nobody in the mainstream press wants to hold the thread long enough to follow it home. With all of this happening, while teachers are being threatened with criminal and liability for caring about children, and elected officials are being sued for flying a flag, the Epstein files are dribbling out into the public record. They're not flooding, they're dribbling. Strategically, carefully managed, partially redacted, released with the energy of someone defusing a bomb in a building that they also own. And what do the Epstein files tell us? What's the through line, the tissue connecting a dead financier's client list to a Florida bill that criminalizes a parent driving their kid to a doctor? It's permission. That's the connective tissue. Permission. Jeffrey Epstein didn't operate in a vacuum. He operated in an ecosystem where the right combination of wealth, access, and a social position meant the rules that applied to everyone else simply didn't apply. Where powerful men looked at the architecture of consequence and found for them the doors were open. Where the signals from the top, the associations, the flights, the photographs, the continued rehabilitation of his reputation after his first conviction said, "You're fine, keep going." And across the Atlantic, in Mazan, France, a man named Dominique Pellicot spent nearly a decade drugging his wife, Giselle, and then inviting men from the village to rape her while she was unconscious. Not importing strangers, not finding other predators through some dark network. The men from the village, local men, neighbors, shopkeepers, ordinary men with ordinary lives who, when presented with the opportunity, when given permission by another man, showed up. 51 of them. 51. Convicted now. all from the same community, from the same streets, from the same churches. And before you comfort yourself with the idea that these were somehow aberrant, broken, identifiably monstrous individuals, they weren't. They looked like everyone else. They were everyone else. Regular men who, when the door was opened and the permission was granted and the consequences were made invisible, they walked through that door. And this is not a French story. It's not a rich man's story either. This is a permission structure story. And this is what we're getting to today. When men at the highest levels of power treat women and children as property, when the message from the penthouse, from the legislature, from the judiciary, from the policy apparatus is that certain bodies don't belong to themselves, whether it's the Pentagon, whether it's in the school system, it doesn't stay at the top, you see. It filters down. It seeps into the village. It tells the neighbor, the coworker, the guy at the bar that something that he's been wanting to hear. It tells him that the rules don't apply. Not really. Not for this. And that's what these Florida bills are. These Florida bills coming your way soon. And that's what they are at their core. That's what the Department of War and a government who completely eradicates DEI is doing. They're not about bathrooms. They're not about children. They're not about your insurance premium or your rent or your flooded basement or any of the actual material grinding problems that brought you to the polls. They're permission structures. And I'm going to pause for a second so I can read this comment on YouTube, where we are live streaming right now. It says, released documents are forged based on UN, USA, EU, ZIO laws. An altered official document is automatically rendered as faked and forged as applies to millions of censored Epstein docs. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what that means. My mind is on a different track, but some of you will get that. Back to where we were. Permission structures, permission to discriminate, permission to exclude, permission to look at a teenager in crisis and say, not my problem. Permission to look at your gay neighbor and say, your history doesn't count here. Permission to look at a woman and know that the men who wrote the laws have already decided how much of her body, how much of her care, how much of her dignity, how much of her story belongs to her and how much belongs to them. You know, if you haven't seen The Handmaid's Tale, I'm sure 95% of us right now here listening have. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to watch it. It is literally today played out, high budget, awesome. Watch The Handmaid's Tale or read the book if you still read books on paper, but don't do it in Florida. You will be arrested. We're going to jump to the phones in just a second. We will go to Danny in LA in just a second at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Let me just finish by saying, when anybody builds permission structures from the top, when you legislate them, when you file them in committees, when you put them on the floor and have them signed in public ceremonies with pens as souvenirs, you're not just passing a law, you're sending a signal. You're opening a door. And history, every single time, without a single exception, is going to tell us what walks through. Cary Harrison with you. Let's go to Danny in LA. You're on the Cary Harrison Files. Welcome.
Great
Hey,
to
Danny.
speak with you. Long-time listener. I'm all over the place mentally right now, just because that's what your show does to me. It's a very high perspective, all-encompassing look at society and everything that's plaguing us these days. But I was hoping more for a dialogue than anything else. I didn't want to go on any type of monologue or make any comments. But everything you're talking about this morning and always, it just gets me going. But I'm just thinking about how everything starts with integrity and how we just live in a world where the rules are great until they're actually needed to apply. And the permission paradox here that we live in is interesting that you bring up. And we've lived in a society that is forever just been in, there's a lot of secrecy, a lot of darkness. And I'm in awe of your show, and I listen every Friday because there's a specific place I have to be every Friday, and I'm always driving home at this time, and I constantly think about how much darkness is in the world and how much programs like yours are needed in lighting up the darkness and causing thought to evolve and take a look at things that maybe we're not paying attention to because we're constantly distracted. But I wanted to say thank you to the station, to you, and all the great shows that are on this station. I started listening to a hip hop show in the late 90s, and it would come on Friday nights, and that's how I got turned on to KPFK. And ever since then, it's been from Sonali Kohatkar to Amy Goodman to there was Intervisions, and I can't even name all the shows that I've listened to on the station, but yours is particularly intriguing because you really give life with your words to the things that need to be paid attention to. But this situation that we find ourselves in right now it's really scary. And I tend to say that all things lead back to Zionism and big tech and the secret handshakes that are happening behind the scenes to eliminate the excess of labor. We have an excess of labor force right now, and the marginalized groups are usually the first to get picked on because they're the easiest. And the whatever normal is, the normal society loves to look at anything and say, well, I'm better than that, or I'm not that person, and my lifestyle. And I just don't see any one way of living this life and this existence and this consciousness that is within all of us, yet, some are dulling it and dimming it and not really giving it much attention because of the distractions. Is really just become more apparent than ever that we're at a crossroads here. So listening to you makes me feel sane. It makes me feel like, okay, we're not alone. There are other people who think this way. And I'm particularly just enthusiastic about the show. So I just wanted to say that. And I don't know why this station isn't funded the way it needs to be, and why the things that get greenlit in Hollywood are. But I guess this is the society we live in.
What a great call. I mean, not just because it was filled with flattery, but because you are exactly the kind of person that I would like to think there are millions of out there. We just haven't met them yet. So I am really grateful you called in today, my friend.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I hope there are enough of us. I hope there are enough of us that are actually going to do something and make a difference. And I don't know that voting is going to do it. I don't know what needs to be done, but it doesn't seem like that's a fair game there. And I'm afraid of what's happening this year with the midterms and now all the new voting laws that are being they're attempting to implement, and hearing that State of the Union, although I didn't want to, I do it almost to laugh and to I don't say mock, but in a sense mock, who is gullible to believe this, but listening to what they're trying to do and how they're going to stifle the voices of the people, it's frightening times, my friend.
Well, I appreciate your call, my friend. Thank you so much. The good news with Danny is we know that, at least in the radio world, broadcasting period, for every one person that calls, there's generally 1,000 people that would call but don't, because it's hard, it's scary, it's vulnerable. So if you take Kim and multiply by how many people are listening, there's a lot of Dannys out there, and that makes me happy. Speaking of happiness, I think it's time for us to give a little love to the very station Danny talked about.
The Cary Harrison Files.
Let's bring on the great Gary Baca. And Gary, we've been talking a lot about this permission slip, about Epstein, about how people do what they do. And there is a book that lays out all of this so brilliantly. And by supporting KPFK, people get to really have this forever book that lays it all out beautifully and support the station at the same time.
That's right. We should give Danny a show for saying all those great things about you. The great Danny from LA. Thank you for that call. And do you feel the same way too about Cary Harrison? I know I do, and a lot of us do. 818-985-5735. And Cary, we have $1,000 goal. We are short. We are halfway there. So if we can get 5 of you to pledge that $100 for Cary Harrison, that would be incredible. Be like Christopher from Redlands, who picked up the book Spider. Thank you, Christopher. And Barry Levine was heard this morning on Democracy Now! That's how important KPFK is. When you listen in, you never know who you're going to hear. You're in the newsroom with KPFK, classes in session with Cary Harrison, and this is Cary's last fund drive show. Next Friday, he will not be fundraising. So now's the time to pledge your support and let us know that this show is needed on KPFK. So if you haven't pledged for Cary Harrison before, do it now, because then that shows us how important this program is by the pledges that come in. 818-985-5735. We will not be taking your financial donations next Friday. So now is the time. Do not procrastinate. Go ahead, pull over, stop, and say, you know what? I want to give Cary Harrison that $100. And if we can get 6 of you, 5 of you to pledge your support for KPFK, we have made it. So before we go, we got to say that the FBI and the CIA failed us by not arresting Epstein, Maxwell, as they investigated Epstein years and years ago. And they did nothing because they don't want to arrest some of the elite. And all these guys should be tried. Former FBI officials, all these people. So Trump should be getting life in prison for all we know, right? For some of the crimes he's already did. What, like 38 felonies, 138? Who cares? But he's got so many felonies, it's ridiculous. So, along with Donald Jr., because he did something illegal. He just looks like he broke the law with these suspicious beady eyes. So folks, go to your phone, pledge your support, get the Spider book by Barry Levine. 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. They are afraid to prosecute Trump and the rest of the cronies out there. So once again, fundraising update. We are halfway there. We only have 1 minute to get to the goal. And thank you, Renee, and for the producer, strong, independent woman, for producing this show. And thank you, Cary, for your program. Call now and pledge your support for Cary at this time. 818-985-5735. And yeah, we got to go, Cary.
We do. And let me also just quickly give a nod to Renee. It's her fault that I'm doing these long form talks, but I'm just passionate about it. And she just said, do it. So it's her fault. Blame her. Pick up the phone. Call 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK, or go to kpfk.org. And I will look forward to seeing you all next week.
The Cary Harrison Files.